All right, good morning. It is so great to have you here today. Today we're going to talk about different strategies for keeping young kids engaged while families are working. I'm Manisha, and I am the co-founder and lead teacher at Modulo, which is an organization that helps support parents who are working from home with kids and provides personalized learning experiences for children who are learning from home. So, the first thing that I wanted to address, which is very important when you're having a conversation about engaging kids from home while parents are working, is that young children need a lot of undivided attention. It's really critical for their health, their well being, for forming healthy attachments, which makes them turn into compassionate adults, adults who feel safe and at ease. So whenever we have this conversation, it's kind of important to keep in mind that really the ideal situation for a young child is to have a full-time caregiver, whether that be a parent, a grandparent, a school or a daycare where they can get that undivided attention. Now, realistically, that's not possible. We are living in a global pandemic where parents are working full time from home with kids. They need that income in order to provide their children with food and housing, and also having a job supports one's own well-being, and having a happy and fulfilled parent is really important for a child. So of course, even though if our ideal situation is that the child would have a caregiver all the time, unfortunately that's not always possible. So that's why I wanted to have this workshop today to talk about strategies for how you can keep your children engaged while you're working. So the first thing to say is that if there is any way you and your partner can trade off, if you're a single parent, that might not be possible. If you can get an in-law to help, if you can share care with a neighbor and make that family part of your bubble, this really is the ideal situation. And you really should not be afraid to ask for help. In the past, we lived in a world where grandparents often lived close to families and people retired, so this was more doable. And fortunately, now everyone is so spread out, that's not always possible. So just to reemphasize, it is really ideal if your child can have that full-time care. So that's a funny way to start a workshop about how to keep engaged while parents are working, but very important to say. So secondly, just to piggyback on this, children really do need quality time. So one thing you might want to start off thinking about is how much uninterrupted quality time you give your child every day. Do you give them at least 30 minutes of uninterrupted time, reading a bedtime story, or sitting and really engaging with them at dinner, or taking them to the playground? Or whenever you're with them, are you on your phone? Are you doing something else? Are you distracted? Lack of quality time can really add up like debt. So if you're not spending any undivided time with your child every day, it'll just keep accumulating, and you'll see that they're more and more needy and more demanding of your attention because they crave that quality time. Especially if I talk to families who have siblings and they say, wow, one of my younger child or my older child is just constantly needy, annoying us all the time. The advice I always give is, can you just sit with that child without their sibling and give them 30 minutes? Can you take them to the playground? And that just makes a world of difference, because lack of quality time really does add up like debt. As you give your child less attention, they will need more and more time from you. So just in terms of thinking about how you keep your children engaged while you're working, again, this is really kind of dependent on your child's age, but what we usually talk about is trying to carve out 2 to 3 hours a day of relatively uninterrupted time. That's probably realistic. It's not kind of realistic to think your child is going to go away for 6 hours and work by themselves, but 2 to 3 hours, especially if your child is 5 or 6, it's totally doable. If they're under 5, it might be a little overly ambitious, and you might want to think about 30 minutes to an hour at a time. So young children do really well with consistent schedules. So if you carve out this block of time where you're working and they're playing or learning at the same time every single day, that will really help to make it happen. So, maybe your block is from 9 to 11 or 9 to 12, and every day you have a nice breakfast with your child, and then you say, okay, now is our work time when I'm going to work and you're going to play. And, I think that um, children are pretty responsive to their parents' needs. So the more you can kind of explain to your child why this work period is important in as much detail as possible. Otherwise they might just assume like, oh, you have better things to do than play with me. I mean, you can go to the extent of saying, when I take time to take, let's say you're using your block of uninterrupted time to go get a massage or to run errands. You can say, when I take time to take care of myself, I can spend more time with you, and we can have a better time when we're together. When I take time to work, I earn money, and I use money to buy us yummy food. So I would really appreciate if you could help mom or dad have this time so that I can earn money. That would really be supportive to me. And I think you'd be really surprised that your kids do understand, and they will try to support you. So that's the first thing, just to kind of think about having this time 2 or 3 hours at the same time every day. Um, one, so we will go a little bit more in depth with activities, of course. How do you actually, what are they doing during this 2 or 3 hour block? But I will say one big investment you can make early on is to teach your child to read. There's a lot of great reading tools, but it takes about 20 or 30 minutes a day, kind of talking about that quality period. I love Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. It's a book you can do with your child in 20 minutes a day. A bit dry, but it works. There's another app, Homer, we like a lot for teaching reading. Teach Your Monster How to Read, the Bob books. If you can teach your child to read, that is going to pay off, because reading is something they can do for hours on their own. Especially if you're someone who loves to read, it's likely your child will love to read too. So another thing that I think is kind of on all of our minds right now is the struggles with screen time. I just so admire parents who have no screen time up until, age 5 or 6. But the reality is sometimes you really have to work, or you just really need a break. And putting your child in front of the screen is the best way to give yourself a break. And I would say parents should be very forgiving of themselves, because that time you take for yourself is so important to being able to be a good parent for your child. And also, you're important too. The time you take for yourself models self-care. Children learn through modeling. The time you take for yourself helps you work, which puts food on the table for your child, and it just makes you happier and able to be a better parent. So, guilt doesn't really help with being a better parent. So if you need to, put your child in front of a screen, if it works, I would say just, forgive yourself a little for that. There are different types of screen time. And I think, I've kind of evolved in my own views on screen time. I felt for a while that I just, wanted kids playing outside in the forest all day. But I think, we live in a world where every person at some point in their life is going to have to engage with the screen, and probably a lot. I mean, if you are here on Zoom with me today, it's probably, you're no stranger to virtual environments. And I think far better to teach your child to have a mindful relationship with technology than to just deprive them of it altogether. One thing we can think about when we talk about screen time is, what's our own relationship with technology? I mean, I try to set a goal for myself that every 20 to 30 minutes I would stretch and move around. And I think this is kind of a good rule to go by with your kid as well. So one thing you can do is, if your child is doing some screen time, and we'll talk about different types of screen time, and you're working, maybe you're side by side, you're on your computer too, they're they're doing their app or watching their YouTube video, and every 20 minutes there's a little chime and both of you take a stretch break. So you're actually doing something good for yourself. You're also helping your child move around. So a child glued to a screen for 3 hours versus a child taking breaks every 20 minutes to jump around, move, dance. Very big difference. And you're training your child how to navigate screen time in that manner. In terms of, what screen time, what should you use? I mean, there's a huge range of different things your child can do on a screen, ranging from kind of violent, competitive video games to shows that are teaching them to buy stuff they don't need, to some really engaging and interesting learning apps, and probably, some YouTube videos that are so incredible. They're, almost as good or better than any classroom teacher, because you can have access to the best teacher in the world teaching on YouTube. So some of the ones that I like, and I will also give you a list of these that you can try. One of my favorites is Homer. I mentioned that before. It's an app that teaches kids how to read. They also have integrated some math games. It's very interactive. So your kid is not just staring at a screen, they're actually interacting and learning. And I think that makes a really big difference. Sometimes I've done a lot of meditation in my life, and I read this interesting book which compared meditation to and TV. And the difference between TV and meditation is that in meditation, you're learning to control your thoughts. Whereas with TV, it's kind of like a meditative state, but your thoughts are being controlled. So we're looking for screen time where the kids are directing their play, that it allows room for creativity. It's not trying to kind of force them into a box. So Homer is one that I love. I'll just say I have spent years researching thousands of different apps for kids, and I will tell you there are a few that I think are really great. And in terms of being engaging, in terms of allowing for open-ended creativity, in terms of being secular, in terms of being adaptive to a child's learning style. So I've really narrowed it down to a few that I think are really great. And also Homer and the other tools I'm going to recommend are mastery-based, which means that children need to master one concept before moving on to the next, which is great for their learning. So Homer is a really great one. I also love Khan Academy Kids, their app, if you haven't tried it, it's for K through second grade, pre-K2. They have math, they have reading. I mean, it's awesome and free, which is great. Cosmic Kids Yoga is a YouTube channel, which I just love. They have every kind of yoga. And you can, if your kid loves birds, there's a birds yoga, Valentine's Day yoga, Minecraft yoga, Pokemon yoga, Wizard of Oz yoga. You can pick anything your child is passionate about, and they can do yoga. And actually, I would say one of the only reasons I've stayed in shape during quarantine is because I've been doing Cosmic Kids Yoga with children. So it's something you can also do together if you need to get some exercise. Art for Kids Hub is wonderful drawing channel. Again, kind of like Cosmic Kids Yoga, they have every kind of drawing you can imagine for every level. You could draw a tulip, you could draw your family, you could draw a Pokemon character, again, anything that your kid wants to draw, it's there. And it's a dad, he has 4 kids, he draws, and then his child draws next to him. So the kids, sometimes kids get upset if they make a mistake in drawing, but when they see the other kid making a mistake, it really encourages them to push forward and to develop that growth mindset where making mistakes is good for learning. So, and that, drawing is just so great for building fine motor skills, learning how to write eventually, all that. Those are such important strength in your hand. Another one we love is Epic. If your child doesn't know how to read, so Epic has tons of books that they can choose from to read. And then it also has quizzes at the end that help with critical thinking, because they see how well have you read the book. And then if your child can't read, they have a read to me feature, which I really like a lot. I mean, I think, phonics is kind of the foundation of teaching reading, but what's nice about Epic is they highlight the word they're reading. So it does help with sight words. And some kids really learn to read kind of by osmosis. when their parent is reading or when they see the words flashing. So for that, your kid could really learn to read by doing the read to me. I do recommend supplementing with some phonics because it can get a bit challenging if they know how to read, but they don't know how they know how to read. And then other kids just really have to learn through phonics. That method doesn't work at all for them. But we love Epic. And then another fun one is Math Tango. It's an app. I believe they only have it for iOS right now, but it's just really, really fun games for learning math, really well designed. So those are a couple. I also have a whole list of 100 different YouTube channels, range science, technology, ballet, you name it, that are just really good quality and well vetted. So, a lot of us actually learn now through YouTube. So it's kind of great to teach your child to learn that way, especially if you can kind of train them to pause and rewind. There have been studies that people who rewind and pause when they're watching YouTube videos just learn at much faster rates than those who kind of don't pause and watch it through. All right, so those are some of the favorite apps, and screen time is such a complex topic. There's so many types of screen time, but I think what I want to emphasize is that these apps are your friend. They are really good tools for learning, and you should feel comfortable trying them out and learning how to help your child develop this mindful relationship with technology. All right, big one here. Boredom is your friend. So many parents are terrified of their child being bored, and they feel like they kind of need to fill up their roster with activities all the time. And I would say if your child says they're bored, this is the most important time to not give them an activity. Boredom is how children learn creativity. It's how they tap into their intrinsic motivation. That boredom is a feeling of frustration that forces them to think about what they want to do, what they're interested in. And if you don't allow them to have that boredom, it can lead to depression. It can lead to, what we call laziness. It's just so critical that you allow them to be bored. Boredom sparks creativity. So, I think any parent, it's just really hard to see your child feel frustrated. It's really painful. But, the best thing to do if your child is bored is just to allow it. You can use empathy and say, it's frustrating to be bored, I don't like being bored either. Let's just, give some time to think, and I'm sure a great idea will come to you of something you want to do. We don't necessarily see boredom in children so young, but maybe starting around 5 or 6 or so, it might come up. But it's important to allow that boredom. And also, I would say for yourself, I think I have often felt not good being bored, and by kind of just like staying present to the feelings that are going on in my body when I'm bored. Where do I feel boredom? In my head, in my hands, or it's a buzzing in my chest. Then that kind of boredom starts moving and passing. And I think it's been an important, I guess even kind of indicator in my life of what to do next when I'm bored. So embrace boredom. That's really, really important. Setting up an environment. So once we actually start coming again to this idea of a 2 or 3 hour block, or for a younger child, a 1 or 2 hour block, a lot of your success will depend on how you create an environment. If you can create a workspace for your child where they feel really comfortable, they have a couple different activities that they could choose from, very clean, very safe workspace. Again, we're kind of investing in having something better in the long term. If in your child all they have is this huge bed and no space to play or work, that's not going to be so great for them. Sometimes when we talk about these independent learning blocks, we talk about strewing. So you might put, your independent learning space might have some Legos, it might have Play-Doh, it might have their iPad to play apps, but it would have, I would say, it's nice if kids can work on the floor, maybe a nice rug, markers. If you don't want to get too messy, make sure you get the kind you can wash off. But just making sure that space is really great for them to work in, and that they clean it up when they're done with their work period. They should take responsibility for that. So what are some of these activities that you can do with your child. My all-time favorite, I know this is not always possible, is playing outside. So, for example, if it's possible for you with your work, if you can find a park with Wi-Fi, or if you can set your desk up outside and make sure you're well dressed and your child can play outside, this will keep them absorbed for hours. I mean, and they will get to move around, they will feel refreshed. It's, I mean, it's the dream activity. Children just find things to do in nature. So if there's any way that you can find a way to work outside and your child can play, that is great. Um, so think about that. You know, you might have to stretch yourself, you might have to get warmer clothing, but it's pretty good. We used to take my nephew to the park, and the park had Wi-Fi, so we just set up this our workspace on the picnic table, and he would just play in the playground. And then again, you know, if he comes and says, I want you to play with me, I want you to play with me, we can say, look, you know, this is your time for independent play, because right now I need to get work done, and that work will help us spend more time together later. So would you give me some time to do my work? I can't wait to play with you, but I just need a couple more minutes. And then to fulfill your promise of spending quality time with the child later on. It's really important. Always fulfill your promises to your child. Um, In-person play dates, I know this is hard right now, but if you do have an only child, especially finding time, finding maybe one other family that you can bubble with so that the children can do play dates together. If there's another child, the children can definitely keep themselves occupied for a couple hours. With siblings, some siblings get along better than others. And you know, that's an area also where we can invest. If we invest in our children who are siblings having a good relationship, it will lead to better independent play. And of course, a lifelong good relationship as siblings is always important. And then to return to my earlier point, if you do have siblings, trying to spend individual time with each child so that they get their own time with you will really help to foster a good relationship between them, and make your child feel a little bit more whole and full and grounded. So Legos, I think this is an obvious one. If in your environment for independent play, Legos are just so great for building all kinds of skills, and some kids can just play with them for hours. Sometimes, so early, we can talk a little bit more, but sensory tables are great. It's just a table with all different kinds of things that the child can touch. You know, you can put kinetic sand in it, water, different types of things to touch and feel. You can get a sensory table on Amazon. I can also send you a blog on how to set one up at home. But if you set it up right, it's not too messy, but especially for the younger ones, they can really get into those sensory tables, and it's so good for them to touch all that stuff. Play-Doh. So Play-Doh is another Legos. You can have your space with Legos and Play-Doh. I recommend trying to encourage your child to do one thing at a time if possible, not always possible. Books, you know, again, we talked about encouraging your child to learn how to read as one of the ways you can invest up front in a more independent time later on. Drawing. Another idea might seem obvious, but is, you know, if we start thinking about these 2 or 3 hour blocks, really plan for having your work block around nap time. I know this is hard, but if you really do think realistically about how much work you're going to be able to get done while your child is there, if there are ways you can say, okay, after my child goes to bed, I'm always going to work from 9 to 11, but then during the afternoon, I'm going to tell my office I'm not available. You know, or I'm going to work from 5 to 7 a.m., whatever is kind of your sweet spot. But then again, I'm going to tell my work I can't work at this particular time. It's really important that you're open and upfront with your work about what your limitations are, because this is a really hard time for everyone, and a good company should be sensitive to your needs as parents. We can address a little bit more about how to talk to your work, but please know that everybody is in this situation, and you might find your boss to be a little more sensitive. But again, carving out your periods for dedicated work and your periods for dedicated childcare, making sure that those are separate. It's really important to this working well. Ways to share childcare, we talked about a little bit. Finding one neighbor that you're bubbling with, moving closer to family. Those are some different strategies that you can use. And then I guess, and also you might be surprised to find that potentially some single people in your area might be really excited to just spend some time with kids. A lot of people are eager to help during this really difficult time. So, getting better at asking for help is really important. And, you might even post to a parent group saying you're really stuck and you need childcare. Is there anyone who can help? And know that you're asking for your help, not just for you, and you deserve help, but for your child who needs that undivided time to grow up in a healthy way. That might help motivate you. So yeah, and then finally, one of my favorite activities to keep kids engaged are iPad play dates. So I don't know if you've ever tried one, but even if your kid is like 3 years old and you find them a buddy on iPad, I mean, those kids can keep themselves entertained for hours. It's wild. They might need a little bit of parents around the edges in the beginning, but they'll just be running around the house playing. You can also have an iPad play date with a grandparent. They're really fun. You definitely try that if you haven't already. And then the last thing I just wanted to emphasize again is really asking your work to be sensitive about your childcare needs. You deserve support with childcare. You are raising the future generation. And that is something that a lot of companies are already sensitive to, but they can be more. So if it means you need to work when they're asleep and then not work during the day or anything like that, just ask for the help you need. So that concludes the presentation on how to keep kids engaged while working from home. And now we are going to end the live stream of this presentation, and I'm going to open up to questions, but also feel free to, if anyone is watching on Facebook, feel free to email me your questions. It's just manisha@modulo.app, and I will be happy to respond.